can never hate or shame yourself into changing. If you're someone listening to this and you want to be more comfortable with your sexuality, don't be judgmental about the part that isn't there yet. Just be curious and compassionate and change from a place of love for yourself instead of changing from a place of hate for yourself.
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. I am so glad you're here today. Sex positive and shame free are two phrases that you probably don't think about or hear a lot about when it comes to overcoming pornography for good, but that's just what our guest today, Sara Brewer, believes in as one of the keys to helping her clients overcome pornography use. Sara is a life coach that has inspired thousands of individuals to overcome pornography for good. You might already know this, but multiple studies show that pornography use, especially discordant pornography use, doesn't help a marriage. But sometimes our approach to the problem actually gets in the way of healing, like when we emphasize shame and harming ideas around sexuality. That's why I love this interview with Sara. She's positive and upbeat too. In April, I'll be hosting a live workshop all about overcoming pornography use if you're interested in more help on this topic. Now, these live workshops that I do, if you haven't joined one before, they're a really fantastic way to get your questions answered in a supportive environment with experts at a fraction of the cost. And you can sign up for this on our website. Can I tell you something that means a lot to me? This past weekend was our annual marriage retreat in southern Utah. 20 couples from all over, as far away as Alaska and Florida, came to spend a weekend working on themselves and in their marriage. We also had a lot of fun. We went ATVing in the desert and rappelled down 120-foot cliffs in a canyon. I want to tell you about one couple in particular that stands out to me. They came to the retreat with an already pretty good marriage, but wished things were better in the intimacy department. Or perhaps I should say, he was hoping she'd be fixed by coming to the retreat. Through the 4 days we were together, it was amazing to see the visible shift in their relationship. He realized that he had a lot of work to do in his own right, and she courageously addressed her own inhibitions. It's funny to say it this way, that although the retreats are primarily about taking sexual intimacy to the next level, very little of the content presented in our discussions are actually about what goes on in the bedroom, about sexual acts per se. It's because to have a really good sex life, it's 100% about having a good foundation of your relationship and how to be intimate. And I mean intimate as in knowing and being known. I'm inspired by these couples who took courageous action this weekend to really grow and develop their skill of knowing and being known with their spouse. We're going to stay in touch with each other and keep each other updated on our progress over the next few months. And we're talking about possibly doing a 2.0 version of this retreat. If you'd like to be the first to know about our next upcoming in-person retreat and have a transformative experience for yourselves, please go to getyourmarriageon.com, click on retreats, and join the waiting list. Today, I'm excited to announce that on the weekend of June 9th and 10th of this year, my wife Emily and I are going to host a virtual lovemaking retreat. Yes, it's a virtual retreat where we meet online. You and your spouse get a hotel, Airbnb, or send the kids to grandma's house for the weekend just to be alone. Then you can join us over Zoom, but don't worry, you aren't on camera, for 3 sessions while Emily and I guide you through sexual concepts and practices to strengthen the two of you and to find more depth and excitement in your sexual relationship. Everything is taught from a Christian perspective, like there's no nudity or live demonstrations. It's not that kind of a virtual retreat. But people of all faiths, of course, are welcome, whether you're Christian or not. It's going to be really affordable, fun, and a great way to celebrate International Lovemaking Day, which is on June 9th. Get it? Because it's 6-9 on the calendar. Anyway, you'll find more information about it on getyourmarriageon.com under retreats. And now let's meet Sara Brewer. Sara Brewer, welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. How are you today?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Now, it's really unusual to have, I think, someone as prominent as you are, you're a female, but you coach primarily men on how to overcome pornography. How'd you get started on all this?
Yeah, I coach men. I coach everything from 18 to 65. I have lots of older gentlemen, and we also do have some women in the program. But yeah, so I started working with, like, young adults within my church congregation, and, if you're Christian or in some Christian communities, you'll know that pornography comes up a lot. Comes
Yes.
up a lot.
Mhm.
And it was really distressing for my clients, and I was telling Dan before this that I used to be way into the porn kills love messaging. I would, like, post it on my Facebook, "Porn kills love, stay away from porn." And as I coached and as I learned, I realized that messaging was actually really harmful, and there was a moment where I was looking at my porn kills love merchandise and realized this is not the message that actually helps people, and this isn't even actually that true, and my clients are having so much success, but we're doing things way different than maybe they've done in 12-step programs or they've done in some of these more, like, let's fight the enemy programs.
Uh-huh. Fight the
So
new drug type programs or whatever. All
yeah.
right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and, like, I like fight the new drug, and I think they're moving away from some of that
Uh,
harmful shame messaging, so this isn't like a I hate fight the new drug because I
I
don't. I
know.
like
Uh-huh.
but yeah, some of that messaging. So I had a moment where I was in my parents' basement. We were living in my parents' basement. I had a brand new baby. My husband was starting a business. I was starting a business. We had no money. And I just had this moment where I was like, I have to coach on porn. I have to. Like, this is my calling. It was like a God thing for me. Like, I just felt it there in my parents' basement on the table. Like, "Oh, my brand new baby, like, there are no money. Okay, are we gonna do this? We're gonna focus on porn?" "Yeah, we are." Scared out of my mind. I'm young. I'm a girl. Who's gonna listen to me? And I found, that it's done really well, and it's been so fun, and we created an amazing mission, even though and I was just telling Dan too that I get I get a lot of nasty comments on social media and Facebook specifically.
Like what?
Oh, it's been a long time since I've looked at them because I've
Uh-huh.
hired someone to go and delete them for me.
Oh, good.
That's how but, like, I'll get, like, nude photos that show
Oh,
up.
really? Huh.
People will send me, like, yeah, nude photos, and they'll send me, just, like, kinda gross things, and,
Mhm.
uh, I have to be really careful with the messages that I open, but there's a lot of good too.
That's good. So in my area, there's a conference held every year, every other year called the Utah Coalition Against Pornography. And it's a really, really good mission, right? They want to bring more awareness of the harm of pornography use and things like that. And I went to this conference and there was like hundreds of people there. And I'm sitting in one of the rooms, one of the breakout sessions about human trafficking. And the next session was on child abuse. And then
Mhm,
we had another session with the keynote speaker about Snapchat and Instagram and all these other apps that teens are using and how it's like a vehicle for child pornography. And I
mhm,
walked away from that conference like so scared, like,
mhm.
oh, we live in such a dangerous world. Like, I can't trust anybody. I'm almost willing to go home, like, cut the internet cord. Like, no more. We're going back to like old, we're going to be Mennonites now. Like, you gotta,
Totally.
right? I'm scared for my life. And if anything, it did not. I'm so scared about how big the problem of pornography is or how much like out of control behavior can happen because of sexuality. It did not drive me closer to my spouse. In fact, I was even scared to be intimate with her.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
contrast that with a few months later when we put on our first Get Your Marriage On conference in the same town. I wanted to do like a similar type of a idea of like the importance of intimacy in marriage, but I wanted to have a very opposite effect. So our messages were about our keynote speakers were about how to make sex great. How do you have good, effective date nights? How do you overcome difficulties in communication so you can get closer together? And people were walking away from that event like holding hands. So there really is a difference, like same type of a goal, but a very different approach, like a shameful approach versus a sex positive approach.
Yeah.
So, what do you see in your work where you help individuals the most with their success? Is it more of a fear-based approach or more like a sex-positive approach? What have you
Yeah, it's
seen?
very sex positive. So my tagline line is shame free and sex positive, and we
Uh,
incorporate that into everything, and not just because like we want to like feel better, but truly because you can make so much more progress in quitting porn if you have a shame free and sex positive lens than if you have a fear based lens.
that's so good. But why do so many people struggle to be sex positive?
Oh, because of what we've been conditioned and taught about sex. And I mean, I think about growing up in a video I saw as, a youth in my church was. Maybe you saw this one where, like, one screen, it's like the man looking at a computer in a dark room, and the next scene is his wife leaving him, and, like, just messages over and over and over and over and over again that sex is scary, sexual urges are scary, we can't trust ourselves, we can't trust our bodies, we can't trust our urges, and just, I mean, and people are doing their best, right? People are doing their best, but now we know a lot more about thoughts, about mindfulness, about how to manage urges. It's not something we need to be afraid of anymore.
Mhm. Why do people keep preaching the fear message?
I think it's they just don't know better and they haven't experienced anything other than the fear messaging. So one of my big things is willpower. We
Mhm.
teach our clients how to get out of willpower. And this is the only thing that people know how to manage urges who are teaching the fear shame techniques is willpower. Now what
They're white
happens.
knuckling it, so to
Yes.
speak. Uh-huh.
Yep, yep, white knuckling it, pushing it down, pushing it away. What that does because, the idea here is there's either willpower, gotta white knuckle it, or we're just gonna give into it. And this is like a pendulum that I see a lot of people swing back and
Mm.
forth on is willpower, willpower, willpower. We can't do that forever. Oh, I'm exhausted. Give into it. What
Yes.
happens with the willpower is it makes it stronger. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. When we hold a beach ball underwater, it pops up. And so yeah, it's really scary because when we willpower it, we don't have control over it and it's limited and we don't really know what else to do. We just swing back and forth, swing back and forth. So that's my first thought about why people still teach that.
That sounds exhausting. What's a
Yeah.
better approach?
It is exhausting. There's a third approach. Okay. So number one, there's willpower. Number two, there's just giving in. And then there's number three, which is a mindful approach. I call this like sitting with the urge, processing the urge.
Mm.
So it's allowing, and we learn how to do this. We're learning how to do this with emotion, right? I have two toddlers and we watch Daniel Tiger. And
Uh-huh.
Daniel Tiger teaches this to the kids. He says, when you feel so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4. 1,
Uh-huh.
2, 3, 4. And so it's this skill of letting that emotion be there. We
Mhm.
don't need to make it go away. Let it be there, breathe into it, sit into the discomfort, but allow it. And so it's a similar skill with urges. You'll instead of trying to push it away and being afraid of it and being afraid of everything it's going to destroy, recognize that it's not. Recognize that you can just sit with that and it can be there and you can experience sexuality while still choosing to act on your value system. It's a skill that takes practice and obviously not getting to the full depth of it right
Is there
now.
is there a time when you've had to practice that for yourself? Maybe
Oh yeah,
yeah, can you tell me about that?
absolutely all the time. I think about like when I was a teenager how useful this would have been. It's like
Yeah.
that's just like so many hormones like.
Uh-huh.
And I use the willpower all the time. My husband and I sorry if this is too much information, but my husband and I were high school sweethearts, and we just, like, loved each other, and we'd be like,
Uh-huh.
"No, we're not gonna kiss. We're not gonna kiss. We're not gonna kiss." "Okay, we're gonna kiss." Right? Like, just so much time of that, and we're like, "Oh, we kissed, dang it," 'cause we thought kissing was bad, and
Uh-huh.
that's a whole other story.
Right.
But yeah, so right, like we do this with anything, you can do this. It's not just a sexual urge skill, it's a skill with emotions. I also like I said, I'm a mom
Mhm.
and anger when I had my second baby, again, like all the postpartum stuff, like emotions. And I remember one day in particular being so angry. And I was like, no, wait, I'm not gonna be angry. That's a stupid thing to be angry about. I'm not gonna think about that. I'm not gonna focus on that. Push down, push down, push down. That night comes along and I just exploded.
Uh-huh.
It exploded, and I knew I was like, "Oh, it's because I've been pushing this down all day instead of practicing processing it, working through it." instead of just trying to ignore it. So we use it that you can use it with urges for sugar. You can use it for urges for Mountain Dew. Any of
Uh-huh.
these urges for extra dopamine. Pornography has a lot of dopamine in it. You can use it with emotions. You can use it all everywhere. It's just a very general, beautiful skill.
Gotcha. I wanted to talk about the dopamine thing for a minute
Okay.
because I hear a lot of messaging. There's a popular app out there called Brain Buddy that people use.
Mhm.
I don't think it's very effective, but it's on this theme that dopamine is the enemy. You have too much dopamine, you're addicted to dopamine. So participating in activities that give you dopamine are harmful. Therefore, we're going to cut out dopamine in your life, and pornography
Mhm.
is your main source of dopamine. That kind of an idea.
Okay.
Where does that theory break down?
I think if we villainize dopamine, we kind of get the same thing as if we're villainizing sexuality, right?
Yeah.
You do get more dopamine in your brain, and so with porn, there's some extra dopamine, and that's why you might have consistent or more compulsive urges to view porn. So, like, your brain remembers that you get this dopamine from porn every night at 10 PM. It's gonna remind you every night at 10 PM. Now we can use that, just recognize it and see what's happening, and then use some skills to start bringing down that over desire without villainizing it,
Hmm.
and recognizing that, yeah, there's more dopamine in porn, but yeah, there's also more dopamine in sugar. And a lot of us have cravings for
Uh-huh.
sugar. And that doesn't mean addiction.
Right. And there's also dopamine from, doing service to other people. Even
Oh, yeah.
prayer or Bible study, those things give you dopamine too. So
Yeah.
dopamine alone isn't the enemy. It's
No, it's not. And some of these substances like porn or sugar, they're gonna have, I don't know, like extra concentrated amounts or something that make it like, "Oh, yeah, I would rather do porn than read my
uh-huh.
scriptures." But that also doesn't mean addiction. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that there's some stuff, like, it means your and I won't go deep into this. You can listen to some of my other stuff, but it means your reward system is working correctly. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean it's broken.
Yes. Right, right. Okay, we talked about the pendulum swinging a bit,
Mhm.
and I want to talk about people that maybe they don't use pornography or pornography is not part of their past, but still it's the same coin but the opposite side where instead of the indulging, they're more in the shutting down, not addressing and
Yeah.
not developing their sexuality and thinking that's a more morally superior position.
Yeah.
For example, I'm coaching a client where the couple uh, the their marriage is fantastic. They've been married a very long time. They're really good friends. They parent well together. It's just sex is the sticking issue in their marriage.
Yeah.
And for her, in this case, she doesn't want to be sexual. She doesn't feel safe being sexual because she's been taught, sex is scary, sex is dangerous. Look at all the horrible and harmful things that can happen with one's sexuality. It needs to be managed and controlled.
Mhm.
And that's leading to really a lot of difficulties in the relationship.
Yeah. It's just a change in viewing what is beautiful human development and being able to accept that, guess what? We're sexual beings. We have sexual organs. And most of us, do have a sex drive. And that's can be a really beautiful thing. Like, do we accept the body God gave us exactly how it is? Or do we think that God created some evil here? That's something
Hmm.
you have to grapple with.
Hmm.
I recently participated and spoke at a BYU conference around pornography, and one of the speakers there, I loved what he was saying. I need to get him on my podcast.
Uh-huh.
He was talking about porn specifically, and I hope this relates. If it doesn't relate, tell me. But he was saying, instead of using, like, always going to your partner and talking about porn in like a confession,
Yes. Uh-huh.
what if we could use it as a way to connect? A connection point, whether that be connecting with something you're struggling with or connecting with, "Guess what I found out that I liked? Guess what I found
Yes.
out that is exciting to me
This speaks to my
sexually."
eroticism. Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I understand that if there's a lot of conditioning around sex is this necessary evil, sex is bad, that's gonna take some time and some, like, intentional reframing, intentionally looking at it differently. But sex doesn't have to be a necessary evil, and like I see with pornography, when it is, that's when we have out of control behavior. That's when we are disconnecting from our people. It's scary and it might be hard to start developing that part of yourself, especially with all the conditioning we were taught around it. But just because it's scary and hard doesn't mean that it's not worth pursuing. In fact, those are probably the things that we should be interested in pursuing.
So, for those that do pursue a healthier integration to their own sexuality, how do you see that helps them just as a byproduct, I guess, of their compulsive pornography use?
Yeah. So the pornography use, if you're pushing down, pushing down, pushing down, pushing down, and you have a ton of testosterone and you're male and you're just like trying to, I always think of the scene in Hunchback of Notre Dame. Have you seen
Uh
it?
huh.
With the
Yes.
priest, the creepy song where he's like
Yes.
lusting after Esmeralda.
Esmeralda. Yes. Uh huh. I know what
Whenever
you're talking about. Uh huh.
whenever I think of, like, pushing down and demonizing sexuality, I think of that scene,
Uh
and
huh.
it just, like, it doesn't create goodness, it just creates, like, suppression, which is like holding this beach ball down underwater, and then it just when you hold it down, it just pops up, and you feel like you don't have any control. So once
Mm-hmm.
you can start to accept your sexuality, and I can talk here for a moment about the difference between physiology and morality, because this is a really important point for people who have maybe more conservative views around sexuality, which is a really beautiful thing. There's a difference between physiology, so what your body is experiencing, and
Uh huh.
morality. Physiology are those like hunger cues, being tired, and sexual urges. It's just normal, natural body responses.
Hmm.
Sexual urges fall under physiology. They're normal, natural body responses. Now, morality is what we do with those.
Okay. Gotcha. It's the compass. Uh huh.
Yeah, morality is what we do with those urges. So if you have a hunger, if you're feeling hunger, you have choices. You can steal someone's food, you can go make a sandwich. So morality is what you do with that feeling. Same with sexuality. When you have a sexual urge, it is not good or bad.
Uh huh.
It's just there. It's just a physiological response. Now, depending on your value system, your morality is what you do with that physical response. But if we're thinking that the actual sexuality and the sexual urge and the feeling is bad, that's going to create this willpower resist react cycle that we've talked about. And so a key component for my clients is being able to neutralize those physiological symptoms, look at them more neutrally and factually, not shame them. That's huge. Once we stop shaming the desire for sex, they can actually have control over their sexual actions.
Any stories of people you've worked with, or maybe from your own experience, how you overcame shame of those urges or whatever? Because shame seems to be a huge component in all of this, like perpetuates the cycle.
Yeah. Well, I think about a client, Koji, and he was like an Ironman runner.
Uh huh.
He did hard things, right?
Uh huh.
Like, so hard. And he told himself he struggled with porn for a long time and it was really distressing to him. He was like, I'm gonna run this Ironman. If I can do this Ironman, I should be able to quit porn. And so he did the Ironman and he wasn't able to quit porn. And he fell into this deep depression.
Right.
A
He
very
can run. He can do an Ironman. He can run a marathon, swim 3.5 miles, and bike 160 miles.
yeah,
But you
it's
can't
crazy.
stop pouring. Like, what's wrong with me?
Right, exactly, it was crazy, and he got really distressed, suicidal for a little bit, really bad. He got out of that really deep place, and he started working with me, and the only work we did was the story that he had around himself. We didn't even, like, do any of the mindfulness stuff, which is something huge that I talk we just talked about the shame
Uh huh.
and how it was everywhere in his life between, like, schooling and parenting influences and just everywhere, and what we did is we decided to rewrite the story of
Hmm.
him, and simply how we did that is just session after session, we would look at the story he had about himself, look at the facts of that story, and then look at, like, the thoughts and what he was interpreting that story to be, so anyways, I'm not gonna get too much into the process, but we just did this work rewriting his story about himself, changing the shame story,
Uh huh.
and he was able to quit, and he's had so much success and such a beautiful experience just from rewriting all the shame that he had about himself.
That's so good. Now, it doesn't have to be about pornography use. There's those that are just shamed to be sexual, period.
Yeah.
Like that couple that we talked about earlier where she's scared to be sexual. How do you help someone like that instill a more sex positive view about themselves in that?
Well, they have to be willing to look at it differently.
Yes.
That's the hard part. And so, if they are, it's just questioning, recognizing, questioning, and being willing to change those thoughts. I love the movement in Christianity and Christian communities around sex positive recently. There are
Mhm.
so many people who preach this that are very spiritual people and very involved in their religion and very close to God. So it just kind of depends on like what their hangups might be around it. Is it because it's like a bad thing, or is it because it's scary to be vulnerable? It's absolutely terrifying to be vulnerable in that way
Mhm.
if you're not used to it.
Right.
It just
Uh-huh.
kinda depends on what's underneath it.
Gotcha. Good, good. Okay, we kind of hinted on this. Can you talk about the value of being curious and incorporate more curiosity as part of being a sexually healthy person?
Yeah, so with people who wanna quit viewing porn, who might have more compulsive use or even just habitual use, they wanna quit. Curiosity is one of the main emotions that we try to foster and develop
Mhm.
instead of judgment and shame. So around sexuality
By
go
the way, I
ahead.
want to pause you there because I think that's brilliant what you just said. The opposite of judgment is curiosity.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I think that.
Yes, especially, like, around sexuality, there's so much judgment.
Hmm.
And curiosity is a great stepping stone because even if you can't get from like judge, judge, judge to this is great and I love this part of me, you can maybe more easily get to, I wonder what's going on here. I wonder why I experienced this. I wonder what this feeling is. So, if someone slips up with porn, they're trying to quit porn and they view porn.
Hmm.
You have options. You can get into judgment. What is wrong with you? I shouldn't have done this. Resist,
Uh-huh.
willpower, cut the cords to my internet.
Uh-huh. Hunker down.
Hunker down,
Uh-huh.
beat myself up,
Right.
which happens a lot, and then when we beat ourselves up, shame spirals, maybe, like, typically leads to a lot of binging or suppression or we can move into curiosity.
Hmm.
So, if we're looking at this like a scientist, just
Mhm.
getting out of the drama of what I did and if it's good or bad, whatever. We're just getting into the mindset of a scientist, like we're watching a new species of animals. What happened?
Uh-huh.
What was I doing? What was I feeling? What was leading up to it? Was I stressed? Was I lonely? Was I insecure? What did I view? How much did I view? What exactly did I see? What happened afterwards? Just getting into the curiosity can help us actually see what happened so that we know where to make tweaks and where to get coaching and where to get help. So that's
R
from like someone who's trying to quit viewing pornography, like the curiosity. Do you want me to speak more about that about something else?
Yeah, on the pornography side, but also about someone that's kind of just suppressed their sexuality, period, and hasn't nurtured it at all.
Yeah. Getting curious too can be a really beautiful, experience for you, like, even if we don't have big expectations or this is what I'm supposed to experience or this is how people are sexual, right? We have lots of when you watch TV, you see
Mhm.
a sex scene, they're always orgasming at the same time, and you expect it to be like that, and maybe we just get curious and instead I wonder what this is like. I wonder how we experience this. I don't have to be perfect, but what if I was going to, instead of like shoving away this part of me that's sexual and hating this part of me that's sexual, I wonder what is good about this. I wonder what is beautiful about this. I wonder how this actually adds to my life. And even if I'm single and I don't want to have sex and I don't really want to experience like a lot of sexual things right now in my singledom, I can still develop a relationship with my sexuality that is beautiful. Sexuality is also just energy, it's creative energy. Is there a way that I can, like, use this creative energy to create the life that I want? How can I create a really beautiful life with this sexuality instead of just trying to push it away and always being afraid of it?
That's so good. That's so good. That reminds me, a week after I was married, I was a university student with my wife at the time, and I just had so many questions about sex because I didn't have a very comprehensive sex education. I got the biology,
Yeah.
the reproductive biology part, understood, but like how to build a great sexual relationship. Why does my body do these kinds of things? I had so many questions. So I go to the library and I was so nervous. I didn't want anyone looking over my shoulder. So I go to like a computer terminal, like in the corner, and I search for like a human sexuality textbook, thinking that would probably be a safe place to get some information.
Yes.
I wrote down the call number and I go down to that section on the 3rd floor of the library. And I'm like, I don't want anyone to catch me in this section of the library, right? Hey, Dan, what kind of book are you getting today?
Right.
I don't want to know that, right? So I shift my eyes to the right and the left. No one's there. I find the book. I grab it, tuck it under my arm. And just my luck, it was a woman checking and scanning the, I give my little library card, right? Like, no eye contact. Don't look at me. Put it in my bag. And later that night, I go home and I pull it out of my bag and my hands are shaking. Like, this might have answers, but is this really okay? I'm just feeling so many questions. Like,
Yeah.
is this okay? I start like flipping through the book and there was like an illustration, like a line drawing of a man and woman having sex in like, I think it was a 69 position or something like that. And
Mm.
I freaked out like, this is pornography. And I slammed the book shut and I returned it the next day and I didn't get any of my questions answered. And
Yeah.
I figured it was better for me to go through life without answers to my questions
Uh,
than to like really go through the discomfort. Of course, I got over it years later. It took me 13 years, but
yeah.
like it's about being curious. And I think if we approach curiosity with this question in mind, is there any goodness in this? Or how can this bring goodness to my life or to my spouse or to the world around me?
Yes.
If you're seeking goodness, I think that will lead you on the path to what you really want. And depending on your circumstances or where you are, I think when you go with the goodness frame, you're going to look for ways where sex can be a positive in your life because it's about creating and creation and connection and those kinds of things.
Yeah, beautiful, and I think it's really empowering to realize, guess what? We don't have to be perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, the goal here is to grow, and sometimes, like, maybe I don't know if we're really afraid of looking up stuff, maybe you do see stuff and you look stuff up, like, you're not gonna be ruined
Right.
or
Right.
no
Right.
we get to learn and we get to grow,
Mhm.
and God's okay with that.
Yes. We don't seem to have that problem when it comes to, I don't know, finances
Yes,
or
right.
learning the piano, right? Where
Yeah.
except sex seems to be its own category, and I
Yeah.
don't know why we treat it that way. Of course, there's moral implications to that, but, like, there's too much of that negativity around that category, but it's okay for every other category.
Yeah, such a
Mhm.
good point, such a good point, and I think it really is people not knowing how to control emotions and how to control feelings and urges, which is why mindfulness is such a beautiful skill that we have now that can give us confidence to explore, because we know that no matter what, we can handle whatever comes up.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about mindfulness skill briefly,
Sure.
because I think when people hear that, they think, like, sitting in the lotus position, like, with the Headspace app or, humming while they meditate, but I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, when I say mindfulness, I'm just talking about the general skill of letting emotions come in and out. And so I typically have like a picture that I'll show of some guy with emotions coming in his body and coming out his body instead of us holding emotions down and pushing them away. And you can do this, you can learn this really well through meditating, but you don't have to. I mean, you can be mindful while you're washing the dishes. So, washing the dishes, oh, I'm noticing, oh, my body feels a little bit off. It feels tight. What is that? Oh, it's stress. Okay. Instead of, oh, I'm not going to feel stressed. Okay, let's just breathe into the stress. Let's get curious with it. Going back to curious, it's being curious with what we're experiencing
Mhm.
in our body, letting it be there, not demonizing emotions, not demonizing anger, not demonizing stress, not demonizing sexuality. As we do that, sometimes people are afraid to do that because they think if they do that, it's going to stay. It
Mhm.
doesn't. It's like a paradox. It doesn't. When we allow it to be there, it comes in and it comes out. When we don't allow it to be there, that's when it gets stuck.
Love that. That's so good. Okay. Any last words of advice to someone listening to this episode today where they themselves really struggle with some sex positivity in their life, whether it's manifesting itself through shutting down their sexuality or
Mhm.
indulging in pornography use or whatever, for example?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is just that you can never hate or shame yourself into changing.
Ah, right. It might work short term, but there's no long-term benefit to that.
No, not at all. And so if you're someone listening to this and you wanna be more comfortable with your sexuality, don't be judgmental about the part that isn't there yet, or where you think you should be, or what you think you should be doing. Like, let's just be curious and compassionate and change from a place of love for yourself instead of changing from a place of hate for yourself. That's gonna make the biggest difference, especially, for people who are wanting to quit porn, really around anything, but of course, I see that often because it's what I do.
Sara, that is fantastic. This has been a really good interview. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with me and with everyone.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so fun.
What's the best way for people to find you?
So I have a podcast, Overcome Pornography for Good. I also have a free masterclass. It's kind of like the best of the podcast in a short form. If you want like a short hour-long class, you can sign up for that. sarabrewer.com/masterclass. It's free. And then at the end, it talks about how to work in my program. If you want like some professional help in a program, you can find the information at the end of that video or on my website.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.